Jamie, and thanks everyone. Welcome to the first in our mini series of webinars to start to open up a discussion about a safe return to sport. Those of us in the industry in Alberta are aware and watching with bated breath for a change to the restrictions on a potential move towards stage 3 of the Alberta's relaunch plan. And meanwhile, we at the University of Calgary and Sport Calgary wanted to engage the community to start to think about the new future in amateur sport and recreation and what that might mean for us. This is a webinar not necessarily about providing all of the answers, so sorry if that maybe disappoints a few of you, but we will look to address some of the issues that we have found in our journey and talk about our preparations for reopening and making a safe return to sport. As I mentioned, this is the first in a series, and I'm delighted to welcome my two very esteemed guests to the panel, Albert Iamartino, the Director of Active Living and the Outdoor Centre at the University of Calgary, formerly with the City of Calgary Recreation Department and a high-level rugby player, and multiple Olympic medalist, world record holder and world champion in speed skating and Chief Executive of Sport Calgary, Catriona Doan, herself no stranger to the Olympic Oval. As the newest director of the Olympic Oval team at the university in the Faculty of Kinesiology, I recognize the importance of engaging the community within sport and recreation. For me, the term community takes on many meanings, from athlete to parents to coaches, volunteers and technical officials, to governing bodies, to varsity teams, and the list goes on, and including local businesses and sponsors and many more. So I think we have an obligation in and of ourselves to engage that community and start to talk about how we will safely return to sport. For those of you who don't know me, I'm not necessarily a natural born Canadian, as you might gather from the accent. I arrived at the Oval from my last role in Repsol Sports Centre as their Director of Sport, and arriving on the 23rd of March to begin the most unique of onboardings that I think I've ever had in my life. As we in the city were entering into a pandemic and the city had just declared a national emergency, the Oval staff were beginning to start to work from home. And really, I want to spend a couple of moments just to sort of talk through what we at the Oval and the Faculty of Kinesiology at the university have been doing during the COVID period. And then I'll walk and talk us through a little bit more about the preparations that we're currently doing as we look to return to sport. So like many businesses in the industry and more broadly across many sectors, we transitioned into the virtual world and supported staff to get established with the tools and training they needed to be able to do their jobs, including access to Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, and every other platform under the sun. But it was critical that they got the hardware and software they needed to be able to do their jobs. Unlike the normal working day at the Oval, where people can typically drop into offices informally, we have gotten used to setting up on our online meetings. I must say the team at the Oval has done an incredible job at adopting new ways of working, finding new ways to communicate, setting up home offices and continuing to add value to the organization while tackling projects that ordinarily we would not have been able to get to. We also took the opportunity within the Oval to undertake some much needed capital maintenance on the plant, reached out to our sponsors and partners and looked for ways in which we could support the whole community. As the team was trying to get to know me and me them, a task that was made even harder by being in the virtual world, not being able to see and experience the Oval operation and how staff operate in their normal working environments, I feel I could almost write a playbook for how onboarding during a pandemic might happen. Not that that would be a bestseller. There was a clear need to ensure people were supported, though, and directed to focus on the tasks at hand. I, as the director, newly appointed director, focused a lot on communication with the team, making sure that channels were open to reassure them that we will get through this. And I think that's probably one of the underlying things that will inevitably come out of maybe this discussion and more as we work through this pandemic. And also to re-emphasize that it's temporary, or hopefully temporary in nature, while things may change in the short to medium term. At times of crisis, it's also important that people feel they have structure and feel in control. So I paid attention to things like regular monthly meetings, setting clear deliverables for teams, and continuing to ensure we have monthly staff meetings. We also engaged the team by giving them permission to get creative in the online environment. They were brilliant, I must say. We have had a social committee set up, having virtual coffee meetings, had staff workouts online, had virtual birthday celebrations, and I've even had the odd social engagement to round off a week out of hours, of course. As a leader, I think it's important that staff have opportunities to find joy, have a laugh, and have fun while tending to the business of the moment. And as I reflect back on my military career, one which I had before coming to Canada, one thing that got us through those tough situations was the ability to find humor and to laugh at appropriate times. And the Oval team has certainly done a great job. I really do sort of feel proud to be leading the Oval family. But really, as we look and focus towards reopening, it really begs the question, what are we at the university and within the sporting community in Calgary doing to prepare ourselves? And there is an abundance of work, I must say, that is going on right now. Unable to really provide you with a spoiler alert about when the Olympic Oval may reopen, I can share with you that we have been drawing up plans to make a return to training and competition. We have aligned a draft reopening plan to the province's relaunch strategy and plan, and that has been submitted to the university's crisis management team for approval. At this time, there isn't a set reopening date. Flexibility will be of utmost importance as we integrate the Alberta health guidelines for safe reopening of facilities. Some of the things that we're looking to focus on, though, as a facility are things like reviewing waivers to make sure that we're protected from a legal and governance standpoint. We're introducing pre-screening measures, looking to introduce questionnaires for athletes and participants at the first point of contact so that they can have the opportunity to self-declare and or we can elect to allow them entry into the building or not. The coaching team have done a fantastic job of modifying training. Some of the things we're looking to do would include adapted or modified outdoor training, adapting, modifying indoor training whenever we get the opportunity to re-enter the building. But we are busy working and building plans to do that. We're also looking at analysing group gathering sizes. How do we manage that? How do they process through the buildings? What are they given access to? Those are the types of questions that we continually ask ourselves. We're also looking at sanitization measures, as is almost every industry. We focus on group safety to make sure people feel safe in the building, and hopefully they will as soon as they're allowed to re-enter into the building. And we continue to work on contingency planning. I, as a former navigator and pilot within the Air Force, we always focused on what ifs, and Albert will speak to this more clearly, and I'm sure you also will, Catriona, but know that we in the Oval are continually asking ourselves the what if questions. We're doing real practical measures too, like introducing plexiglass, utilizing touchless pin pads, and implementing measures to minimize the spread of germs while on the ice. Our work processes are also changing. We want to make sure that people feel safe within the building, providing additional information where we can, so that they know how to remain safe within the building, and the processes and procedures are really clear to staff and participants, adhering to things like social distancing, frequent hand washing, and making sure, as I said, the groups feel safe during training, during and after training. Suffice to say that this is going to be an ongoing journey to experience new ways of working, and I'm a believer that adversity brings opportunity, and this truly is an opportunity for us to reset. As we look across the business, the training environment, the competition environment, all of those things are under review. For instance, how we train athletes or other user groups on how they train within the Oval or outside the Oval may look different in the future than it did in our previous world. There may be one or two virtual sessions in the future that could also alleviate and bring some opportunities, alleviate pressure on the operation to allow additional groups in. So whilst we think that this may be a challenge for us, it also presents itself as an opportunity. For our other user groups, aside from our high performance athletes, the importance of adopting and maintaining a healthy lifestyle could not be underscored, especially during this time. We all know that moderate amounts of physical activity improve immune systems in the general population and provide health and mental health and well-being benefits. After this prolonged period of isolation, I am starting to see people complain of isolation fatigue and crave social connectivity. And what greater way to achieve that than through sport and recreation? And I would encourage all of us to start to engage our communities, to think about and get them to think about how they will safely return to sport, not only in how they recreate and how they build up and progress into a sporting and physically active lifestyle, but also how they do that safely. So I think I'll pause there, and at this point, I'll turn it over to Albert to talk about active living in the outdoor centre at the university.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you having me on, and it's been great working with you, even though it's been online. I know a lot of people have Zoom fatigue, so we hope that you guys stick with us, and we'll do it nice and quick and get to the points that we need to. So in respect to that, I'm the Director of Active Living in the Outdoor Centre. I've been with the University of Calgary, the Faculty of Kinesiology and the University of Calgary for the past year and a half. Previous to joining the university family, I was with the City of Calgary. I was with both Calgary Recreation and Calgary Parks, starting as a recreation program specialist, working in many different portfolios within the City of Calgary, from fitness to sport programs to skateboarding and the like, to eventually leaving my role as a regional manager and coming on over to the university. While doing that as well, I balanced a career with as a rugby player. I played overseas professionally in Italy and in Scotland. I've also played in New Zealand and Australia. And so really have a passion for sport, for recreation, for health and wellness and the like. So what does Active Living in the Outdoor Centre do? Well, first of all, I'll go with our mission. Our mission is to enrich lives by providing quality programming and educational experiences which promote and encourage lifelong active living for all. So what does that mean? Technically, we're campus recreation, but we do a whole lot more, and that includes getting out to our community. So we run our facilities, we run programs, and we run rentals and services. One of the largest and most diverse recreation units based on North American campus. We have a team of 40 full-time and up to 600 part-time staff. And on an annual basis, we handle about 47,000 registrants in over 75 recreational health and wellness activities, which include summer camps. More than 1 million users use our facilities, which include a fitness center and track, a 50-meter size pool, racket center with 17 international size squash courts, a climbing and bouldering wall, a gymnastics center, and a satellite gymnastics center, which is based out of the Spray Lake Sawmills Recreation Center in Cochrane, and numerous multi-purpose rooms, of course, for group fitness and such, and gymnasiums, and of course, the Outdoor Center. The Outdoor Center runs an array of outdoor programs and provide the community with over 10,000 outdoor rental items. We also run a satellite location at Bowness Park. So, what have we done since this pandemic? Unfortunately, as most of you guys have, we had to cancel all our winter programs as this happened in the start of March. From there, we then had to close all our facilities, and then we ended up closing, of course, the Kinesiology A and Kinesiology B buildings. All our staff started working from home. Similar to Peter, we set them up as best as that we can. One thing that we noticed is how resilient a lot of our staff were. Understanding of the predicament, collaborating with each other, and working well from home. Besides cleaning up everything that we needed to do in respect to canceling our programs and of course closing our facilities, they also started an Active Living community webpage, and we really worked on getting a social media platform to stay connected, not just with our students, our faculty, and our staff, but also the general public in the community. Some of the content that we provided was anything from fitness videos to a personal trainer, Instagram takeover. We had activities for our Minds in Motion, which is our summer camps program, and just anything in regards to that, to just try to make sure that we're giving back to our community. It's been 10 weeks since our closure, so we're really chomping at the bit. I think, if I could speak for my team, but I know for the recreation industry, and not just the recreation industry, the sport industry, the health and wellness, and when we just kind of go into this larger collective, we're all chomping at the bit to go, but we know we want to do it in a really safe manner. So before I get into details, what are the few things that the pandemic has shown us? I think it really is vital to to realize what it has shown us. One being the importance of sport and recreation to each individual, but us as a society. I know everybody who misses recreation and competition, they miss it as athletes, they miss it as spectators, and they miss it for their children. Again, I know I'm preaching to the converted, but the benefits are not just physical. We know it's also mental health and resiliency and economy, but also socialization and much more. Before I get into what we're going to do to try to reopen, one of the things I want to clarify, and I've been really transparent with myself and my team and our collective group, is that it's okay to be nervous, because I think we're all a little nervous on what does reopening look like. It was really, I hate to say easy to shut down, but I think the reopening is going to be a lot tougher because there's just so much unknown. And it's okay to be nervous, but let's do what we need to do to ensure that we're keeping safety at top priority. So how do we return it to sport and recreation safely? Again, I know you guys heard this probably a million times, but it is unprecedented times. I keep looking back and I'm like, well, the floods were pretty similar, but again, going back, they're not. So we know information is constantly changing and there's no tried and true plan or playbook on how to reopen without any risks or any liabilities. So what have we done from an active living perspective? Well, we've looked at all our lines of business and broken them down because we run so many. And we put them in each phase, working with the Alberta Biz and the provincial relaunch plan into stages, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And put basically each one of those lines of business in one of those categories. What I can say for stage 1 is that we have 3 proposals that are going forward. What we know is that the outdoor recreation industry is a prime or a great opportunity to explore. So we're really trying to get our outdoor center rentals and services up and running. And again, with 10,000 items, we want to ensure that we can rent those out to the general public and do it in a safe and healthy manner. The second piece, of course, to that is the services piece of it, is that we want to ensure that we can provide bike servicing and everything in between there. The last thing is, of course, our summer camps, which is, of course, pretty hot topic right now as we're getting quite close to a decision, but we're just so many moving parts, understanding that it's pretty difficult. So let me take a step back and talk about process. So what we've done at the City of Calgary, or with the University of Calgary, is that we've, like I've said, we've put each line of business in a stage, but we've also come up with a proposal. And this proposal basically is in alignment with the relaunch strategy and taking each guideline respective to the line of business and going through each individual mitigation factor and ensuring that we're doing our checks and balances on how we're going to mitigate those concerns or those factors. We then have launched a committee, so a kinesiology committee that has the likes of Peter, myself, our dean, our athletics director, and marketing communications, and a few more individuals that unfortunately can't remember at this time. But we're using that as a vetting group. So we're putting these proposals forward. We're vetting these proposals, and then once we're good to move forward on those, we'll now bring those to the crisis management team, which is our centralized university team that will make these decisions on each proposal. Understanding that there's a lot to concern and a lot to be considered and a lot to be thoughtful of, and ensuring that we're balancing out, of course, safety, but then that relaunch, that reopening, that invigoration of sport and recreation. Just further to what Paul said, we're really, I think this is a great opportunity. If anything that I can recommend is that going in, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work to get all this information itemized to ensure that we've done our due diligence for each individual factor to move forward so that they can make a decision. But I guess there's also benefit in that as well, for the fact that we can truly go back to ourselves and say, yeah, we've done everything we've needed to do. We've crossed all our T's and we've dotted all our I's to make sure that we're confident moving forward with this certain line of business. So, you know, I really hope for each individual out there that's looking to relaunch to really, a couple things that we can take to move forward on, I guess. We need to be nimble and ever changing because the information is ever changing. We need to commit to do the pre-work, as it'll be a lot of it, but it's be well worth it. And the last thing is to be collaborative. We need to work together as an industry, sport, recreation, health and wellness, and whatever else that falls in between, to work together to share information and to really collaborate and communicate so we can relaunch and reopen together. So that's really everything in a nutshell. Hopefully you were able to take some good tidbits out of that. I will pass that on now to Catriona.
Just trying to unmute. Okay, thank you, Albert. Thank you, Peter, and the entire team at the Oval and the University of Calgary for doing this webinar. We have a lot of participants. I'm guessing everybody is from various industries, from sport, whether you're a parent, participant, whether you're youth, whether you volunteer, staff, whatever. We're all in this together. And so looking back at what Peter and Albert have said, some of the key words have been community. And this is a community. I think this has brought our community together, not just Calgary, but the community of sport. And I mean all the way from grassroots to high performance. And Peter was talking about the athletes getting back to training. And, the reality is for winter athletes, this is an easier process than it is for summer athletes, because for winter athletes, they're starting with the dry land, go out for bike rides, and they've been able to start that process. For sure, it's more of a struggle for summer sports and for any sports that are indoor. But the key about community is that when we look at the fact that this is the first of many webinars that are going to happen at the Olympic Oval is it's a community place, because it is a place where people come together, whether you're watching sport, whether you're participating, whether you're just learning how to do it. It's a place where I was a participant in high performance sport for 17 years. It is why I had success in speed skating, but it's also the place where my kids learned to skate. And every time there's any public skating, you see people learning to skate, whether it's young kids, whether it's new Canadian students, whatever. So this is a community event. This is a community and a situation that has brought our community together. Other words that really resonate with me: collaborative. The entire sport, recreation, physical activity, health and wellness community has come together and are collaborating, because the title of this is Safe Return to Sport. When this all hit, it was, even for my kids, they're at home. Oh, great, we don't have to go to school. Well, now everybody wants a bit of normal. We don't even know what normal is anymore. And so now we're talking the launch of phase 1. Okay, so now we can start to do things. Now, Albert, I think you said chomping at the bit. Now we're going, okay, we're ready. We're in a good situation. Let's get going. But we need to make sure that it's a safe return. If you look at what's happened in Ontario, they went too quickly, I believe, at certain parts of Quebec, and now they have a spike again. Some people say that Alberta is going too slowly and Calgary is going too slowly. We want it to be safe. We want sport to return. It will return. What will it look like? I don't think it will ever be the same. And that's a little bit from, whether we're a parent or a participant, volunteer, whatever it is, we're not going to have sport look the same. And so understand that it's okay to be nervous, as Albert said. It's okay to go through these different emotions. Maybe it's the excitement at first, maybe it's the fear, and then it's the anxiety, and then it's the what if it's never the same again. Well, it's a changing world. And so as sports start to return, we've had many questions about how do you return. And a lot of people say, well, we need to lobby the city, Calgary's going slow. Everything is coming down from the province. And so let's all remember that it is AHS and the province who's letting us know what point we were at. And we're doing well with that. And all of a sudden some outdoor activity is happening. And all of a sudden now, was it last week? Was it only last week? As you said, 10 weeks. I don't even know. It's all blending together. That now we can start to do sport-specific training on some of the fields. And so we're starting to get into that. And as people say, what is it that we have to do to have a safe return to sport? If you're a sport organization or you're running a program, the guidelines are there. And what they've recommended is that you get together, if you don't fall under a provincial or a national sport organization, you get together with like-minded sports. So do you deal with an arena? Do you deal with a field? What sort of touch do you have? Is there any touch within your sport? And those are the like-minded groups to talk to get together with, so that you can start to develop a plan. But again, this is going to come down from the province. So we keep hearing this over and over, but I don't think we can emphasize it enough that we need to be patient. There's just a document, and on Sport Calgary's website, we're starting to post when sports have return to play programs. This is one, once it's approved, we will be posting. But it's just interesting for not just sport organizations, but as a parent, my kids are actively involved in sport. As a participant, I play old lady sport now. And so for me to look at some of these checklists, and I just want to go over a couple of the things that these checklists have from this sport organization that we will post when it has been approved. But things to think about, and they have a checklist for athletes. And so if there are athletes out there, or youth or adult participants, certain things on the checklist are: wash your equipment before you arrive. Make sure you're not bringing any food. Make sure and wash your water bottle before you arrive. Then there's, and especially if you're bringing kids, for parents, it's you drop off. So make sure that your child has the awareness of where to go, so that once you drop them off, you're not allowed to stay there. As a coach, as a volunteer, it's again a checklist. Have you washed your hands? Do you have the social distancing markers? Do you have enough equipment so that nobody is sharing anything? And then one interesting thing that they have is the contact tracing log. And that's for the organization. So what they're doing is that all players, coaches, volunteers, parents, guardians who drop off children must be on the log. And so it's just keeping track of different things. And so as we talk about a safe return, we need to take all of these things, and there are probably things that we should have thought about 6 months ago. We should be doing regularly. We should be washing all of our equipment. We should be washing our water bottles. We should be washing our hands. We should be aware of the process. We should not be, and I'm sort of pointing to my daughter's ringette team, we should not be sharing water bottles, but now it's not allowed, that you cannot participate unless you have your own water bottle. So there are certain things that are coming out of these checklists that are perhaps common sense, but maybe this is the way the sport is going. All sport in general is that we have to be a little bit more accountable for our actions. We have to be a little bit more accountable as parents, as coaches, as organizations, as facilities, as participants. And so I think that sport is going to change. Something else I want to touch on, and this is where I think in certain ways, sport needs to sort of re-identify itself. My son plays hockey, my daughter plays ringette. We are going 8-9 months of the year, and we are driving a lot of kilometers, a lot of hours every night. All of a sudden now we're at home, and kids are missing the sports. I'm missing that social aspect. Kids are not just missing that physical aspect. Albert brought it up. It's the mental aspect as well. It's also that a 13-year-old boy needs that physicality. They need to be able to sort of have this area to vent and to be aggressive and to do whatever they want to do, and to throw something, to throw a football really as hard as they can. But all of a sudden the parents are going, wow, I don't really miss after work getting into my car, leaving at 6 and getting home at 9:30. And so I think as we look at sport, how can we reinvent it so that we are living a bit of a more wholesome life? And I think that's where sport is going to change, because we have all been at home a little bit too much, but now we've seen it from another angle. And so when we talk about a safe return to sport, we need to make sure it's safe, but we need to also make sure that it's safe for ourselves emotionally and mentally. And what is that going to look like? And, I love that Albert brought up, it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to it's okay to have this mix of emotions because it's something that nobody has experienced before. It's going to be really, really different. You know, there's going to be, there are a lot of resources out there. You know, the Olympic Oval is going to have these webinars. Albert talked about having the online classes. Sportcalgary.ca has a lot of the resources and different, you know, these return to play programs and different risk assessment tools. And we just have to be willing to adapt. And I think that's one of the words when we talk about safe return to sport. We have to be adaptable. This is going to be a collaboration between many different organizations and between the community and the province. And, you know, I think we will be able to point to the rest of the country that we might be starting a little slower, but we're doing it right. And so, you know, I'll just, I'll turn it to Albert and Peter, I guess, before we open it up for questions on, you know, just, it's interesting hearing each other talk because we're all talking about the safe return, but yet we're sort of taking a different angle. But before we open it up for questions, you guys, to all the participants and the attendees, you know, I'm just wondering, what you guys said sparked so many things for me. Just wondering if there are any questions or comments.
Maybe if I'll just maybe have a bit of a plug, if I may. You know, I guess we're also, in terms of resources, there was a question I see in the chat window about how we can get access to some of the resources you were mentioning, Catriona. You know, a lot of the NSOs, the national sports organizations, are doing a ton of work too, and working with their provincial colleagues. So if you are in a sport that is, you know, as part of a PSO and NSO, then, you know, there are some incredibly good resources out there as well. So I think that's you know, whilst we have our own protocols at the university, which are very much aligned, as Albert said, to the provincial relaunch plan, and indeed our individual sporting plans. You know, we are, as you mentioned, predominantly speed skating in the oval, but there are other users from the varsity teams that come in and use the oval on a very regular basis. So, you know, it's a complex landscape that we're having to navigate. And as I said earlier, there isn't necessarily a playbook for this, and we have to figure it out as we go. But we have to take our time, and that's one of the things that we're paying a lot of attention to is being patient, and then, you know, working internally to with our, you know, our colleagues that we work with, and also user groups, to say, look, we will get there. We will get there with your help. But like you said, Catriona, the important piece is collaboration, and we play a significant part in making sure we can, you know, drive that collaborative agenda.
Agreed. One thing that I really liked what you said about the fact that, you know, some of these, it was a good opportunity to reset. So take that step back, and it'd be good for any organization. A lot of the things that we've kind of, I wouldn't say fell to the wayside, that we didn't put as much effort into or concern into, now we have to kind of take that step back, and it's almost a clean slate. How do we build this from the ground up again to ensure that when we move forward, it's sustainable and safe and fun? So, yeah.
I think
go ahead.
Having fun, no, that's the key. And, you know, that's what I think we're missing, is that we've been creative, and everybody's had to be creative on ways that they're entertaining themselves. You know, how many puzzles were sold out in different stores, and I mean, when's the last time we've done any of that? But we get that from sport at whatever level, and we have to figure out how it will be fun again. And for each person, it's okay that it's going to be different. And I think that's what, you know, we have to figure out what's going to work for each one of us, and that's okay, and for your family, and that's okay. I think we cannot say that one way is right and one way is wrong. And so, you know, how will it be enjoyable for each person?
Mm-hmm. And the sporting landscape is likely going to change. You know, Catriona, you mentioned the fact that you're driving your two kids around the city, and, you know, I do with my two kids and with my wife, and I guess thankful for her for doing probably the vast majority of it. But that might change. You know, that might change. We may not necessarily be required to drive quite as much. There may be online training sessions going forward that, that are body weight in nature, that allow us to have the same physiological and mental outcomes, that don't necessarily need us to be at rec centers or at sports facilities all of the time. So that model is certainly changing in the short term, and whether or not it'll need to change for the long term, I guess, remains unknown at this point.
Mm-hmm. So we see there's a question there. Is there a plan or lobby to move sport to phase 2? Can I just comment and you guys jump in? I don't know if you can say a lobby, because it's not anybody lobbying. This is now, it's going to be up to AHS and the province. I think they continue to look at what's happening. So, Calgary got delayed in a few things by 10 days. But now, we continue to do well with what we're doing. We're continuing to respect that physical distancing in the outdoor activities. And so there was a tweet from Dr. Hinshaw yesterday about, at the end of the week, there might be more plans towards, relaunching of sport. Now that's a very general term, because again, are we still talking outdoor? Right now, all indoor is set to phase 3. But I think that was I don't want to say the easy way. I don't know if that's fair to say, you guys, but the easy way. Okay, rec facilities, anything indoor is phase 3. But I think as the plans come forward and as people are putting together these checklists about this is how we would deal with it, again, sports can do that, and then the facility is the one who's liable. So will they have the proper staffing? Will they be able to have the washrooms open? All of that. So I don't know. Nobody knows. There's no crystal ball. But, I think when we're doing things properly and following guidelines, that's the number one thing. Then, we might be looking before September. I hope so. And I'm not sure if you guys have a comment or anything more on that.
No, just to add to it, I think I agree. It's speaking to the point that it's ever changing, that, we may get some different information at the end of the week. And, I think they've done a great job, because I could not imagine, AHS having to manage not just this aspect of the economy or whatever that may look like, but just so many different things. But they're willing to go back. So, originally it was only groups of 10 outdoors. Now it's groups of 50. So they're willing to, draw that line and then see what comes next. And they're definitely listening, which I think is very beneficial.
Agreed.
On the Q&A, there are some questions that maybe not everybody can speak. So one of the questions was about, do we have to get return to sport manuals approved by the PTSOs, the provincial sport organizations, or the NSOs, the national sport organizations, Alberta Health, the city of Calgary? I think, Catriona, you touched on that, and really it's the venue and it's whatever that activity is taking place is a good starting point. But just a question about who would need to approve any sports return manual.
Well, it's the venue becomes the one that's liable. So the facility owner or operator becomes the one who ultimately has to say yay or nay, because they're the ones who are going to open the door and be responsible for staff and for cleaning and for washrooms, for dressing rooms. Somebody had mentioned a meeting I was on that I don't know where, I'm sorry, in BC, there was an arena that was open. And so they were allowed one coach and four athletes. They had to come dressed. So I believe that was for hockey training. So a lot of sports fall under a PSO or an NSO, a provincial sport organization or a national sport organization. So that is what's recommended, is that, it has to be approved by the provincial and then by the national. Certain sports, I learned yesterday, the national sport organization is saying to each province or territory, do it yourself and then get it approved. But a lot of sports and clubs don't fall under that. And that's where I was recommending that you get together with like-minded sports. And again, so what is your facility? Are you in a field? Are you in a gymnasium? Is it a sport that you use your hands, or do you use a stick? Or, is it possible to do some training with each of your own equipment? So looking at the like-minded sports, but again, then it's not the approval by the city, it's the approval by AHS in the province. Again, following all those guidelines. We have to get back to the basics. But, who exactly is approving it? That's been a little bit of the conversation. I mean, Minister here, who now has sport under her ministry, I mean, does she have 800 different proposals in front of her? I don't quite know, and we've been hearing mixed conversations, so I know it's frustrating for organizations that don't fall under that provincial sport organization, but we continue to try to find more answers and more direction, actually more resources to be able to guide groups.
Thank you. There's another question about addressing the differences in the platforms the province gives, the stages, and the cities. I think that's maybe a good question for Peter and Albie as to how the different phases affect your different areas and how you can maybe go through different phases of that and have parts that align with phase 1, parts that align with phase 2, and then fully reopening in phase 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can go first, and apologies if I didn't necessarily cover that in my speaking part. But in essence, for those of you who don't know, the Oval has got a mandate which is effectively a third, a third, a third. So a third of our user group audience is high performance in speed skating. The other third is varsity sport, and the last third is community and club sport, typically speed skating. So, thinking of those user groups, and this is the lens that myself and my team have looked through to align our plans, our proposed plans, I should say, with the relaunch strategy. So we think of the needs of those particular groups, knowing that we're fairly close to Beijing, assuming it's going to go ahead in 2022. We are in a phase with speed skating where they're, as Catriona mentioned, starting to ramp up and get reintroduced after a layoff in the season. And this is typically the time when they would look to be getting back onto ice after some activations, some maybe light strength training, and probably some biking outdoors. So with that in mind, we've assessed the needs of the high performance athletes as probably the most critical to get them to minimize the disruption to their training plan. So with that, we've slotted them into phase 1. And then phase 2, we've looked at the other 2 user groups and said likely varsity would probably be the next highest need. And varsity, as many of you will probably be aware, varsity sports is just a minefield to try and navigate, and it's hugely complex. Nevertheless, our involvement in the Oval is through weight rooms on the track and doing those types of activities. So it dumbs it down a little bit in terms of complexity. And then phase 3, which would effectively be stage 3 of the relaunch plan, or something similar, would be the reintroducing of the public, again, to minimize the risk and allows us to safely manage groups within the Oval and not overexposing large pockets of the population, the general population, to what might be the virus. So again, trying to contain the virus, trying to introduce people, the highest needs groups, and that's our assessment of their needs, back into sport and activity, knowing that there are, bigger goals afoot in terms of sporting medals, and speed skating is likely to perform quite well, assuming we can get back on ice and get training. So that's the approach we've taken, and hopefully that answers the question.
I can jump in there quickly, Jamie, if that's okay. Just from an active living perspective, we're straddling stage 1 and stage 3, to be honest. Stage 1, we're doing some programming that I've mentioned, our outdoor center programs, knowing that the AHS and provincial government is really pushing outdoor recreation. So we're trying to really push that piece to it. And then, of course, summer camps as well, depending on how that goes. And then really, again, it's about interpretation. Some of these guidelines are a little, we're still working through interpretation of what that looks for different organizations or different lines of business. All our programs are out of our facilities. So if we have a racket program or a racquetball program, that'll be based out of a racket center. Are we able to run a program with limited numbers, limited smaller cohorts, but not open the actual racket center to the general public? So some of the things that we need to figure out. So when I say we're straddling a little bit, basically we're in stage 3. So if we were able to open up all our facilities in stage 3, that means we'd open up our programs as well. But if there's a potential, and depending on what comes in the next few weeks from AHS, if we can run programs, meaning in our facilities with limited numbers and following all the guidelines and mitigation factors, we'll potentially do that as well. But again, somewhat of a waiting game and still trying to align as best as possible.
Thank you. There was another really good question that came in. I think Catriona, from having skated in this fashion, and Peter, from having had discussions about this with long track specifically. There was a good question. It actually comes with regards to rowing, but applies to a lot of different sports, about slipstream. So the 6 foot 2 meter gap between people is supposed to be when walking. Obviously, when you are cycling or rowing or skating, you are moving at a faster speed, and that cone behind you expands. So wanted to get some thoughts on how slipstreaming works. And Albert, if there's any slipstreaming in the activities that you oversee, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that as well. Great question.
Certainly, Catriona, do you want me to go first, or would you like to take it?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I guess the short answer is, again, to Catriona's point around the provincial guidelines, they're pretty clear in terms of, we need to maintain social distance at this point in time. So that in and of itself means that speed skaters may not be able, or will not be able, to benefit from a slipstream unless they can maintain that social distance. So our coaching team and staff are trying to get their heads around what that means for in the training environment. For competition, that's a whole different ballgame, and it might mean a reinvention of some activities and some events, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at speed skating, and I guess in speed skating we call it drafting, that's just used for training. And people have talked about, if this is still happening in 6 months, the reality is, if I just look at it, again, I'm not a medical expert in any way, I don't see why you couldn't actually have a long track competition, because it's 2 people in their own lanes. You would restrict how many people are on the ice. You would restrict areas of where you put your skates on. I think it's okay when you're saying about training in sports that you're going to have that distance. So you're not going to be able to do the slips in drafting, whatever you want to call it. And that's okay. I think, again, it's stuff, if I look at when I was training at the Oval, it's things about being careful with your water bottle. It's about not spitting. It's things like that are going to become commonplace that we have to consciously think about within the world of sport. And that's okay. I think those are changes that, we're just going to have to adapt to, and that's all right.
Jamie, I can just add on to that. Not too much from a campus recreation perspective, although some of our programs and such, I think really what we'd be focusing on is that social distancing piece, that 2 meters or 6 feet, whatever that looks like. I think that's our first mitigation factor. And whatever that we may do, be it if we're back to opening up our fitness center, it's ensuring that we're able to provide that opportunity to social distance. So when we have 2 treadmills next to each other, we may just have one open, or if we have a row of them, we're opening every second one. So I think that's the real focus, and that's real focus on I know from a university perspective, if we were to prioritize, it's social distancing and then infrastructure, such as, sneeze guards or plexiglass or whatever that may look like. And then similar to what I said about the fitness center. And then thirdly would be PPE, knowing that's difficult for sport, but I think just one more thing to add. I think the toughest part is going to be for these contact sports. How do they go back to a new normal? Is it more training until that time? That's what is yet to be figured out.
Jamie, on that, can I just touch on the one of the questions then that is there? It's
Absolutely.
how do you think sports where contact is inevitable will be able to resume a somewhat normal gameplay? This is coming from a great ringette coach and a great ringette player. I don't know. I mean, I don't know where sports like a ringette, hockey, sports, football, any of these sports, I don't know what it's going to look like. I really don't. I don't think anybody does. It might be less of a gameplay. I'm not sure. I would love somebody to be able to tell me so I can tell my daughter and tell other people, but I don't know. This will be one of the adjustments that we're all just going to have to learn as we go. And people have talked about in the hockey ringette world of winter ice sports that potentially the season might be a January to April. And, if that's the situation, then we all deal with it. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that one.
Yeah, it is a great question. I was going to bring that up. There was another good question I think is relevant for Peter and Albie again, is with the clubs, and Catriona talked on that gap, is that not everybody necessarily funnels into a PTSO, but there are certainly some best practices that both the Oval and Active Living are doing for their users and for their sports that they could potentially trickle down to that club level about how to execute the sport, how to practice the sport in a safe social distancing manner.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Albie, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say quickly that, yeah, we'll definitely be working with all our clubs or our organizations that work or book our space and work with them, because I think really going back to what Catriona said too, we need to collaborate. So if we work well together, be it the facilities and the sport organizations, on what we both need to ensure that we can, of course, host them, but ensure liability for both. We need to communicate. We need to work well together. So I think this is an opportunity for us to really collaborate as facilities, as sport associations, organizations, and work well together on what safe, going back to safe sport looks like.
Yeah, and just maybe to add on to that, the only thing that we would do, and it's not anything different, is share our plans, and like speaks to the point that Albie mentioned around communicating, and we owe it to all our user groups to make sure that anybody coming into the facility knows exactly what they need to do, how they can be responsible, how we are being responsible in preparation for them coming in, and how we will manage them responsibly in the facility. So I think it comes all down to planning and communication and execution.
Perfect. So I don't think we have any other big questions coming in, and we are right on time. I think one last question we had is, we have another seminar coming up on June 10th, specifically about mental health and resilience through this time. We have secured Clara Hughes of speed skating Olympic fame and cycling as well. And from CSI, we have Elaine Hing, who is a mental health consultant and performance consultant as well. And they'll be having an interview there. That's June 10th, and we'll have more information coming up from there. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we wanted to get was we were wanting to find the right time to hold these seminars. And we had over 177 participants on this session, which is a great start. So we will continue in the next 2 weeks at that time. We'll start at 4:30 again. And please feel free to reach out to us in any way possible through social media. We want to hear your feedback about subjects to discuss, because we really want to keep speaking to the general sport community. Any other closing notes from the presenters?
No, I think you've covered it, Jamie.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and take care. We will see you again on June 10th.